Okay, so the glue has dried overnight, and you can see it's stuck good enough I can pick the body and everything up with it. So I'm going to trim around a little bit. I'm not going to be too precise about it. Now we are ready to add sanding sealer on top of this. I'm using, this is a cotton material, which I would be my guess you'd want to use something that will soak up the sanding sealer. If it repels it, I don't think it, I'm not sure how like a nylon or something like that would work, because it doesn't absorb the sanding sealer. The cotton will absorb the sanding sealer. Now what I'm using here, since it's winter time and I am working in the house, it's too cold out in the shop, I'm using a water-based materials. This is Minwax sanding sealer. It can be used for either oil or water-based clear coats or polyurethanes. So that's what I'm using. You could probably use an oil base or anything you like that this material will absorb, because what you want it to do is dry up and harden out. You want that material to kind of harden out. So I'm trying not to make a mess here. And just whatever you're using, just follow the instructions on the can pretty much. And I want this cotton to soak this up really good. If you're going to use an oil-based sanding sealer or whatever on your material, I would be very cautious and make sure that whatever you're using will be compatible and not adversely interact with the glue below the material, because that could cause a problem. Both these are water-based pretty much. Cleans up with water, the glue and the sanding sealer I'm using. So there should be no compatibility issues there. Now I've used it before, I've never had any problem. Well, I'll say I've used it on the other guitar and it's held together just fine. I'm going to get it soaked pretty well. I'm going to try here. I even want it way out on the edge here, and I'm going to do the wood on the side as well, so it don't matter if you get it on the rest of the guitar or the rest of the body. Or you could do this not just with guitar bodies. I guess you could do it with tabletops or anything you like. Now I want these edges to be soaked in really well too. I want, before I cut it off, I want that to turn just as hard as it will get. Because that will make it cut off with a router fairly clean. Or sandpaper or whatever you happen to be using. Of course I'll be doing some sanding and it'll work for that. It'll sand well in those edges. Now I could use a binding on this for a transition, but just like on the other guitar, I don't have binding. I have never tried it yet. But from what I've watched on it on YouTube, it looks like it might not be too difficult depending on the style of guitar, I guess, or what you're binding. I'll probably give that a good 2 hours. It's pretty thick, so I'll probably give it 2.5 hours, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. Usually I have a stick and a device that holds it where it's kind of suspended in air on the stick, and I can spin it around and do the whole thing all at once. But I'm doing it inside. I don't have that in here in the house. This needs to be, you know, 60, 70 degrees to cure properly, and it's too cold in the shop for that. So I'm just gonna do it the slow way, and I'll flip it over to the other side. Then I'll go over it with sandpaper. I'm probably about a 320 grit lightly. I don't want to eat into the material itself, just kind of give it just a slight sanding on both sides once it's dry, and give another at least 2 or 3 coats. I'll see how it goes as I go. I'm going to sand the same between each coat, so if I don't video that, we'll know that in the next steps. And that will have to be done out in the cold, the sanding. Well, I really don't want to do that here in the house and create a mess. So I will see you in the next portion. So I have about 4, I think maybe 5 coats of the sanding sealer on the body, and now on a couple of coats on the side, and any bare wood that I could get the brush into. I had to go buy a router because all of my power tools are up in Michigan. I did bring a hand router down with me, but I discovered I don't have the wrenches for it down here. So I went and bought a router, rigged it up on the table, and I routed out the cavities for the pickups and control cavities and neck with a straight bit, then went around the edge with a 1/4 inch or 1/4 round bit, I'm sorry. You can tell that it routed pretty well around here. I took and sanded off everything first with I think that was 220 grit sandpaper. I ran out of 320. I have one piece left in here that I'm going to go around with for the final sanding on the fabric and the edges before I put the clear coat on. It was a kind of a warm day that day, so it wasn't too bad to be out to the shop doing this. So now I have it ready to sand off again on the sanding sealer on the front and back. Got a little bit of a shine to it. You can still see some roughness in there, and a lot of that will be taken out with the sanding a little bit, smooth it out, and when the clear coat goes on, it'll do a little filling. I'll probably never get it perfect, but this is kind of an experiment anyway. The more I practice at it, maybe the better I can get at it. And as you see with the router, it does. The router, you know, once the sanding sealer and everything is soaked in, the router cuts around it pretty clean. So what I'm going to do now, I want to, before clear coat starts going on, I want to go around the edges with color. So I have some plaid folk art paint, and this is neon, so it will react to black light. So I think that's kind of cool. The usual, I was going to go with just a black regular water-based paint, but when I went to get it right now, certain things are getting hard to be found where I shop at. I had to go to a local Walmart. That's the closest thing to me around here that carries any paint. So I think the neon will be pretty cool. So what I've got to do, I'll take my little glass jar here and put some paint in it and go to painting around the edge. Okay, so I tried the blue neon paint around the edges, and I didn't follow my own advice and check compatibility to it and the sanding sealer, because I'd put sanding sealer along the edges. Been best not to do that because the sanding sealer was made for a clear coat, not a paint. So it didn't cover real well, and it didn't stick real well. So what I ended up doing was sanding off the edge again, and I had some glycol coloring I got from a paint store. Guy just gave me a little bottle of it, and I mixed it in with my clear coat and colored it with red. I had 3 colors, and had red, brown, and something else, yellow or something like that. So I went around the edges with that with a clear coat. I have done 1 coat of clear coat on the top. Also, when I went around the edge, I went back over it, kind of leveled it out as best I could, and used a scuff pad. This is just the sanding sealer on this side, and I've got 1 coat of the clear coat on here, and I've sanded it down a little bit with the 320. I think I was out of 320, so I used 220 sandpaper on it. So now I'm ready to give it the whole thing a coat, and this way I was able to, in the house I was only able to do 1 side at a time because I had to lay it on something, so I'd have to wait to let it dry and flip it over. And so with my contraption I have here that I built, and I've had this, used it on other guitars as well. I got a broomstick screwed to a routed out from a neck, and screws going into here. You want to make sure those screws are long enough to get a little bit of meat, but not so long they'll come through the back. And these holes, I was going to use these pre-existing holes, but they lined right up with the holes for the neck. So I just made a couple of extras there. So I'm not going to bore you with a whole lot of painting and all that. I'm going to do probably, I'm thinking at least 3, 4, maybe more coats, because I want to try to get this level. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it is bumpy. I'd like to get it a little more level than that. I don't think I'm going to get it perfect. And to get it perfect, it's going to take a lot of coats, and it takes that a lot of time to dry, because it seems like here in Kentucky, the humidity and everything, it takes this stuff a long time before it really cures, where if you don't set it on a guitar stand or something like that, it doesn't leave an impression in your clear coat or stick to something. I've had some that's went over 30 days and it still is not cured real hard. So you need to give that a lot of time depending on humidity and weather where you are. Seems like in Michigan, it seems like it dries fast, it's not as humid. So I will give this a few coats. I'm going to sand with 220 or 320 between each coat, get it level. And I'm going to go ahead and clear coat over the sides as well as I go. I'm probably not going to use as many coats on the side, because that's basically clear coat with a coloring in it. Okay, I've got the first coat all around. I'm going to let that dry a while. Sand it off with 120 or 220 or 320, whichever one I have. I think I only have 220 left. And give her a few more coats, sanding between each coat. And the next time you see it, it should be ready to be polished. Or maybe I'll just wait till after it's polished and we'll assemble it. So thanks for watching this portion. Have a good one. Catch you later. Bye.